It is 12:14 a.m. on March 18, 2023. I will be resuming my reading of V.I. Lenin, The State and Revolution, beginning with page 31, section 2. The Revolution summed up. Marx sums up his conclusions from the Revolution of 1848 to 51 on the question of the state we are concerned with in the following argument, contained in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. Quote, but the revolution is thoroughgoing. It is still journeying through purgatory. It does its work methodically. By December 2nd, 1851, the day of Louis Bonaparte's coup d'etat, it had completed one half of its preparatory work. It is now completing the other half. First, it perfected the parliamentary power in order to be able to overthrow it. Now that it has attained this, it perfects the executive power, reduces it to its purest expression, isolates it, sets it up against itself as the sole target in order to concentrate all its forces of destruction against it. And when it has done the second half of its preliminary work, Europe will leap from its seat and exultantly exclaim, well grubbed, old mole. This executive power, with its enormous bureaucratic and military organization, with its ingenious state machinery, embracing wide strata, with a host of officials numbering 500,000, besides an army of another 500,000, this appalling parasitic body, which enmeshes the body of French society like a net and chokes all its pores, sprang up in the days of the absolute monarchy, with the decay of the feudal system which it helped to hasten. The French Revolution developed centralization, but at the same time, it increased the extent, the attributes, and the number of agents of governmental power. Napoleon perfected the state machinery. The legitimatist monarchy and the July monarchy added nothing but a greater division of labor. Finally, in its struggle against the revolution, the parliamentary republic found itself compelled to strengthen, along with the repressive measures, all the resources and centralization of governmental power. All revolutions perfected this machine instead of smashing it. The parties that contended in turn for domination regarded the possession of this huge state edifice as the principal spoils of the victor. The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, pages 98 to 99, 4th edition, Hamburg, 1907, end quote. In this remarkable argument, Marxism takes a tremendous step forward compared with the Communist Manifesto. In the latter, the question of the state is still treated in an extremely abstract manner, in the most general terms and expressions. In the above-quoted passage, the question is treated in a concrete manner, and the conclusion is extremely precise, definite, practical, and palpable. All the revolutions which have occurred up to now perfected the state machine, whereas it must be broken, smashed. This conclusion is the chief and fundamental point in the Marxian teaching on the state. And it is precisely this fundamental point which has been not only completely forgotten by the dominant official social democratic parties, but simply distorted, as we shall see later, by the foremost theoretician of the Second International, Kay Kautsky. The Communist Manifesto gives a general summary of history which compels us to regard the state as the organ of class rule and leads us to the inevitable conclusion that the proletariat cannot overthrow the bourgeoisie without first capturing political power, without attaining political supremacy, without transforming the state into the proletariat organized as a ruling class, and that this proletariat state will begin to wither away immediately after its victory because the state is unnecessary and cannot exist in a society in which there are no class antagonisms. The question as to how, from the point of view of historical development, the replacement of the bourgeois state by the proletarian state is to take place is not raised here. This is the question Marx raises and answers in 1852. True to his philosophy of dialectical materialism, Marx takes as his basis the historical experience of the great years of revolution, 1848 to 1851. Here is everywhere, his teaching in the summing up of experience, illuminated by a profound philosophical conception of the world and a rich knowledge of history. The problem of the state is put concretely. How did the bourgeois state, the state machine necessary for the rule of the bourgeoisie, come into being historically? What changes did it undergo? What evolution did it perform in the course of the bourgeois revolutions and in the face of the independent actions of the oppressed classes? What are the tasks of the proletariat in relation to the state machine? The centralized state power that is peculiar to bourgeois society came into being in the period of the fall of absolutism. Two institutions are most characteristic of the state machine, the bureaucracy and the standing army. In their works, Marx and Engels repeatedly show that it is the bourgeoisie with whom these institutions are connected by thousands of threads. The experience of every worker illustrates this connection in an extremely graphic and impressive manner. From its own bitter experience, the working class learns to recognize this connection. That is why it is so easily grasped and so firmly learns. The doctrine, which shows the inevitability of this connection, a doctrine which the petty bourgeois democrats either ignorantly or flippantly deny, or still more flippant, admit in general, while forgetting to draw the corresponding practical conclusions. The bureaucracy and the standing army are a parasite on the body of the bourgeois society, a parasite created by the internal antagonistics which rend that society, but a parasite which chokes all its vital pores. The Kautskyite opportunism now dominating official social democracy considers the view that the state is a parasitic organism to be the peculiar and exclusive attribute of anarchism. It goes without saying that this distortion of Marxism is of extreme advantage to those Philistines who have reduced socialism to the unheard of disgrace of justifying and embellishing the imperialist war by applying to it the concept of defense of the fatherland. But it is unquestionably a distortion, nevertheless. The development, perfection, and strengthening of the bureaucratic and military apparatus proceeded during all the numerous bourgeois revolutions which Europe has witnessed since the fall of feudalism. In particular, it is precisely the petty bourgeoisie that is attracted to the side of the big bourgeoisie and is subordinated to it by a large extent by means of this apparatus, which provides the upper strata of the peasantry, small artisans, tradesmen, and the like, with comparatively comfortable, quiet, and respectable jobs, which raise their holders above the people. Consider what happened in Russia during the 6 months following February 27, 1917. The official posts, which formerly were given by preference to members of the Black Hundreds, have now become the spoils of the cadets, Mensheviks, and socialist revolutionaries. Nobody has really thought of introducing any serious reforms. Every effort has been made to put them off until the Constituent Assembly meets, and to steadily put off the convocation of the Constituent Assembly until the end of the war. But there has been no delay, no waiting for the Constituent Assembly in the matter of dividing the spoils, of getting the soft jobs of ministers, vice ministers, governors general, etc., etc. The game of combinations that has been played in forming the government has been, in essence, only an expression of this division and redivision of the spoils, which have been going on high and low throughout the country in every department of central and local government. The 6 months between February 27 and August 27, 1917, can be objectively summed up beyond all dispute as follows. Reforms shelved. Distribution of official jobs accomplished, and mistakes in the distribution corrected by a few redistributions. But the more the bureaucratic apparatus is redistributed among the various bourgeois and petty bourgeois parties, among the cadets, socialist revolutionaries, and Mensheviks in the case of Russia, The more clearly the oppressed classes and the proletariat at their head become conscious of their irreconcilable hostility to the whole of bourgeois society. That is why it becomes necessary for all bourgeois parties, even for the most democratic and revolutionary democratic among them, to intensify repressive measures against the revolutionary proletariat, to strengthen the apparatus of repression, i.e., the very state machine. This course of events compels the revolution to concentrate all its forces of destruction against the state power and to set itself the aim not of perfecting the state machine, but of smashing and destroying it. It was not logical reasoning, but the actual development of events, the living experience of 1848 to 51, that led to the problem being presented in this way. The extent to which Marx held strictly to the solid ground of historical experience can be seen from the fact that, in 1852, he did not yet concretely raise the question of what was to take the place of the state machine that was to be destroyed. Experience had not yet provided material for the solution of this problem, which history placed on the order of the day later on in 1871. In 1852, all that it was possible to establish with the accuracy of scientific observation was that the proletarian revolution had approached the task of concentrating all its forces of destruction against the state power, of smashing the state machine. Here the question may arise. Is it correct to generalize the experience, observations, and conclusions of Marx, to apply them to a field that is wider than the history of France during the 3 years, 1848 to 51? Before proceeding to deal with this question, let us first recall a remark made by Engels and then examine the facts. In his introduction to the third edition of the 18th Brumaire, Engels wrote, quote, France is a land where, more than anywhere else, the historical class struggles were each time fought out to a decision, and where, consequently, the changing political forms within which they move and in which their results are summarized have been stamped in the sharpest outlines. The center of feudalism in the Middle Ages, the model country of unified monarchy, resting on estates, since the Renaissance, France demolished feudalism in the Great Revolution and established the unalloyed rule of the bourgeoisie in a classical purity unequaled by any other European land. The struggle of the upward striving proletariat against the ruling bourgeoisie appeared here in an acute form unknown elsewhere. Page 4, 1907 edition. The last sentence is out of date inasmuch as since 1871 a lull has set in the revolutionary struggle of the French proletariat. Although, long as this lull may be, it does not at all preclude the possibility that, in the coming proletarian revolution, France may show herself to be the classic land of the class struggle to a finish. Let us, however, cast a general glance over the history of the advanced countries at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries. We shall see that the same process has been going on more slowly, in more varied forms, on a much wider field. On the one hand, the development of parliamentary power, both in the republican countries, France, America, Switzerland, and in the monarchies, England, Germany, to a certain extent, Italy, the Scandinavian countries, etc. On the other hand, the struggle for power among the various bourgeois and petty bourgeois parties, which distributed and redistributed the spoils of office, while the foundations of bourgeois society remained unchanged. And finally, the perfection and consolidation of the executive power, its bureaucratic and military apparatus. There is not the slightest doubt that the features are common to the whole of the modern evolution of all capitalist states in general. In the 3 years, 1848 to 51, France displayed in a swift, sharp, concentrated form the very same processes of development which are peculiar to the whole capitalist world. Imperialism, the era of bank capital, the era of gigantic capitalist monopolies, the era of the development of the monopoly capitalism into state monopoly capitalism, has demonstrated with particular force an extraordinary strengthening of the state machine and an unprecedented growth of its bureaucratic and military apparatus in connection with the intensification of repressive measures against the proletariat, both in the monarchical and in the freest republican countries. World history is now undoubtedly leading on an incomparably larger scale and in 1852 to the concentration of all the forces of the proletarian revolution on the destruction of the state machine. What the proletariat will put in its place is indicated by the extremely instructive material furnished by the Paris Commune. Well, and now, the bottom of page 38.